I've always been afraid of the dark. I've always been like the monster under my bed. I'm always had anxiety or worries of fear of the dark and fear of what's in the shadows. Well, my very first published horror story, Phantom Mitch, a man who got into a car accident. He lost his left arm, but he also lost his wife in the car accident. As he's recovering in the hospital, he tells his best friend, "I can feel Mitch."
Death is the greatest equalizer, that it makes us all equal, that no matter how much money you have, your worth or non-worth in this world, we are all going to die. There's no escaping it.
When you open a book, you open your mind and the possibility of just checking out what this is about, because the most incredible, magical thing can happen. When you open a book, you open up the universe of possibilities.
Welcome to another edition of The Final Curtain Never Closes. Today I have a fascinating guest, Mark Leslie, who is an author of Chills and Thrills. And I think that is very, very well fitted considering what he writes about and the things that our museum represents. So, Mark, welcome.
Oh, Genevieve, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so I read in your bio you've been writing since you were 13.
Yeah, I got my first rejection at the age of 15, a
Oh,
little
wow.
over 40 years ago. So, I'm almost 30 now. But yeah, I got my first rejection. I sent a horror story to a CBC radio contest for writers, and it's more like they were looking for literary things, and I sent them a horror story, of course, and I got a rejection, and my mom was nice enough to keep it. It's my very first rejection, so I still have the envelope with the note from my mom. Mark's rejection, whatever, April, 1985 or 84 or something like that. But yeah, so I've been writing since I was a kid, and my very first work did not get published until 1992. So
Oh,
it took a
wow.
lot of
It's
hundreds of rejections before somebody finally took pity on me or recognized my brilliance, one or the other.
Well, it's interesting that your first book was published in 1992 because the museum also opened in 1992.
Oh, wow, that's very fitting then. And that's when I
Yeah.
started working in the book industry as a bookseller at the same time. So,
Oh, wow.
mm.
Yeah, there's a little bit of connectivity there. We both kind of launched at the same time. So I'm curious, what got you into writing a horror story? Was it an experience you had as a child, or was it something that you read that piqued your curiosity that you wanted to kind of like expand more on? What was it that started that approach to your books?
I've done a lot of thinking about it because a lot of people who meet me say, "Oh, you're nice and you're funny and whatever." I might look scary now because of my hairstyle and the beard and everything, but
Or
people
lack
always
thereof in your hairstyle?
lack thereof of hair. That's right. Yes.
For
Um,
people who are just listening to this.
well, for people who are listening to this, I look like this satanic guy with the same hairstyle and the beard, right? Like devilish
Yeah.
sort of look. But I'm actually a really sweet, nice, you know, soft-spoken person. So a lot of people say, "Well, why do you write such dark stuff?" And I really don't know. I've always been afraid of the dark. I've always been like the monster under my bed. You can't tell me he's not real. I'll always like leap into bed rather than stand beside the bed in case he reaches out and grabs it. So I've always had anxiety or worries of fear of the dark and fear of what's in the shadows. So when I started writing, I couldn't help looking into the shadows and letting that imagination run wild, and that ended up getting into so many of my stories. And I've tried to write straight up tales, but every time I write, my imagination tends to drag me into the shadows. And I have fun exploring it. A lot of the fiction I like to write when I write fiction is what if. So, for example, my very first published horror story, Phantom Mitch, which was received honorable mention in the year's best fantasy and horror the year it was published. It was me wondering. I'd heard of the phenomenon of a phantom itch, and it's an itch that somebody feels on a limb that's been amputated, and yet the limb isn't there, but they can still feel an itch. And I kept going, well, how is that? What is this? Like, oh, okay, well, the limb is in the other world, in the afterworld, in the afterlife. And so I
Mm.
imagined a man who got into a car accident where he lost his left arm, but he also lost his wife in the car accident. And as he's recovering in the hospital, he tells his best friend, I can I can feel Mitch, his wife, Michelle, Mitch, that's the Phantom Mitch, the play on words for the title. I can feel Mitch holding my hand. And people think he's crazy, but he's like, no, I can feel her. I can touch her with my hand that's in her world. And so that was the premise of this sort of bittersweet love story. And again, the horror is really more like a Twilight Zone-ish or Black Mirror-ish what if, without the technology so much as it usually relies on some sort of paranormal. And just exploring those things were always fascinating to me. I grew up reading books about Bigfoot and UFOs and the Loch Ness monster and all kinds of mysteries that were unsolved, and then I wanted to try to explain them or understand them or explore them. And that's kind of what a lot of my fiction is just, oh, what if this, and I just go to town with it, and I have a good time with it, so I assume potentially readers are going to have a good time with it as well.
Very interesting. And so it's I find it interesting that you took that in which you fear and embraced it into a way that you could expand and almost entertain people through the books that you write, and that, you know, they can kind of get a sense of that in which you fear, but at the same time you kind of like dubbed it down a little bit by making it entertaining. And if you think about it, kind of goes hand in hand with the concept of death, which, you know, the museum represents,
Yeah,
also with what, you know, some of your books represent. I'm sure there's, you know, almost in every book you've written, there's death, right? There's a death
yes,
undertone somewhere within there.
100%.
Um, so I always find it very, um, a little unsettling at how much we use, how much we fantasize death in a way that it becomes a form of entertainment.
Yeah,
But at the same time, it's something that we fear. Perhaps that's why we seek to understand it. But at the same time, we always want to turn a blind eye towards it and we don't want to embrace it. But yet we're still drawn to watch it and read about it. It's quite a conundrum, right? You're just this back and forth. You're trying to understand why does it fit, but yet in so many ways it doesn't fit.
right.
It's tragic, but yet it's entertaining. It's really
It is.
something that I have yet to wrap my head around, being in the profession for as long as I have.
Well, think about it as conscious beings, and we don't really truly understand if animals understand the concept of death, right? For my dog, for example, when we're away from home, it's probably forever that he's seen us, even if it's only been an hour that we're outside of the house. Constantly living in the moment and just loving, talk about loyalty and love and just living in the moment. That's my dog Indy.
Hmm.
But is he aware that he's not going to be alive one day? And I think we as humans, our consciousness, we understand that we're not going to be around. Therefore, we have to be fascinated with death. As there's a Rush song, and the lyrics go, "We're only immortal for a limited time." And oftentimes, when we're young, we think, "Oh, I'm going to be around forever," and we recognize that's not the case. Therefore, of course we're fascinated with death. And I mean, and I've written a half dozen true ghost story books, and I've always been fascinated by just how, even if somebody's not interested in dark things or scary things, there's still, a ghost story, or there's still some sort of, and that usually relates to the belief that when we shuck off this mortal coil, there may be another life, there may be another existence beyond this one. And I mean, I've explored that in a lot of my books. I'll give you another example is, my novel Evasion, which is it's a thriller with paranormal undertones. The premise was, when my father had died, 4 months afterwards, and this was complete wish fulfillment, I recognize, and it's very common, I would see him. I would see him across a crowded subway platform. I would swear that I saw him walk, because someone walked the exact same way he did and made a gesture, or cleared his throat in the same way my dad did. I'd be driving down the highway and I'd look, and the person driving the car is like, I could swear that was my dad. And so I took that premise because it was happening to me all the time. Again, writing can often just be therapy. And I
Hmm.
went, what if he really is alive? Well, why would he be alive? Why would why would he have faked his death, etc. And that became the premise for the novel Evasion, where this guy sees his father and then he's just researching, and then all of a sudden one day his boss calls him into his office, and well, that's kind of how the book opens, is the prelude of seeing his dad and convinced he's real and still alive. And then months later, he's doing research, and his boss calls him in the office, pulls out a gun, and tries to kill him. And from that point on, everyone he meets is trying to kill him. So he's on the run, and he believes it has to do with the fact that he's uncovered something that he shouldn't have gotten into. I call it Die Hard in an office building, is kind of like this premise. But the whole
Wow.
idea was, and in my author's notes, I love to do author's notes at the end of the book. In the author's notes, I explained why I wrote this book. I couldn't get it out of my head that I kept seeing my dad. And most of the readers who've read this book, who've written in or commented on it, said, "Oh my God, me too." Right? Because it's a common thing that happens. And,
It is.
and again, wish fulfillment in a lot of ways. Like, God, I wish he was still here so I could talk to him or
Hmm.
can do things with him. And that's such a common thing of wanting to believe that we're going to connect with our loved ones again. And so that
Yeah.
gives us hope.
Hmm.
Even though it's scary, even though it's a dark thing, we still are fascinated with the afterlife and what happens when,
Oh,
we,
and it's a huge unknown for all of us, right?
yeah,
Of course, there's a lot of things that have been written, a lot of scientific journals that have been published that, that there's that we go into this light, that we see,
yeah,
our loved ones. Some people believe that we get reincarnated.
yeah,
Like, sometimes I often wonder, how do I know the things that I know if I haven't been taught,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And we call it stock knowledge, but where did this stock knowledge come from?
yeah,
Was it in a previous life at one time?
yeah,
So it's like there's a lot of stuff, if you want to really go into a deep think tank on it, that could make you believe that perhaps we are reincarnated.
yeah,
Perhaps we do, go into a light, and we sit there and we look over our loved ones that are left behind to ensure that they're able to fulfill the
yeah.
mission they've been put on this earth to do. Um, so, do you have any of your books that speak to perhaps someone's purpose in life, and does it get fulfilled before their time on this earth ends? Do you have anything like that?
Well, I mean, a lot of the true ghost story books that I write, a lot of the stories I encounter have to do with unfinished business
Hmm.
and unresolved, you know, tendencies. I mean, I haven't specifically written a fictional book about that, but a lot of them are like, okay, I never did this, and is this spirit caught in just reliving this traumatic moment over and over again? Because it didn't happen, it didn't resolve the way that they wanted it to, so they just keep trying and trying again. Or is that an imprint on the cosmos itself? One of the theories, of course, because I love exploring different theories of life after death, and the spirit or the soul, or what happens when this physical body is no longer here, is that we're all connected in some cosmic way, just like uh, atoms, the same
Hmm.
atoms that were the kings of thousands of years ago or whatever, maybe in my coffee cup right now, because they just keep getting recycled. Do do our souls go back into this ethereal sort of river, and that's why we sometimes have an experience of a past life, because we're catching a memory from some previous person's existence, or we're all connected. I mean, what a beautiful way to remember that we're all connected. I mean, what are the things, I collect skulls. Like, my skull have a shirt, and I've got 36 skulls here in this office, not real ones, plastic skulls,
Yeah.
right?
Okay. Good to know.
I only because of the stuff I write, people tend, and I have a life-size skeleton Barnaby who travels with me when I could do author
Probably
events,
get
because,
those here at the museum as well.
and they see, when
Of
people
course, in
see
our
me,
involving.
they
Yeah.
either rush over because they go, "Oh my God, I bet you I'm gonna love what he writes," or they say, "Don't make eye contact with the crazy bald guy with the skeleton. Stay away from him." So they know it's either their cup of tea or not. But one of the things I love about skulls is it's the one thing we all have in common. right? Beneath our skin, beneath whatever identities that we have in whatever society we're in, we all have that in common, and we all have that collected collective soulness, or this essence of I. We all have that in common.
Very true.
So it for me, particularly in a world that's very divisive and very much, me versus them, or us versus them, or whatever it is, this is a reminder of just how much we all have in common,
Oh
and
yes,
and, and that's a
it's
beautiful thing.
it's like one of those things that I've always got people to kind of understand too, is that we all bleed the same. If you
Yeah,
take away our outer layer, our skin, the our
yeah,
hair, our eye colors, the things that identify us and make us different,
yeah,
right? We are all the same,
yeah,
regardless. And I truly cannot remember who made this quote famous, but they always say that death is the greatest equalizer.
yes, yes, yeah,
That it makes us all equal. That no matter how much money you have, no matter your lineage, your
yeah,
heritage, your worth or non-worth in this world, we are all going to die.
yeah,
There's no escaping it.
yeah.
You know,
That is
um,
so true. And you generated Shakespeare again. You almost went previously said, if you prick us, do we not bleed? if
yeah, exactly.
if you wrong us, do we not suffer? I mean, like, just human nature in general. There's such. I think it's important for us to remember those things, particularly when we get into heated, antagonistic moments. We have to remember.
Yeah, yeah. It kind of like brings you back down to earth per se, right? It's like, whoa,
Yeah,
wait. The last time I checked, we have, we bleed the same color. We don't.
yeah.
There's not any differences between us other than that in which we create,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah, and I mean, it's so amazing. I was at the doctor's office the other morning, and I was sitting beside a couple I had never seen before, and their baby. And baby was about 8 months old, and the baby was just loving everyone, friends with everyone, smiling, just happy. And I'm like, we are born that way. We're born innocent. We're born with a sense of wonder and joy and thrill, and just want to just take it all in. And then what happens is we put up these walls and barriers, and things happen to us that cause us to have negative experiences or whatever. But I was like, wow, that magic. And so the one thing I do know of myself as a writer is the one element I've maintained, apart from my immaturity, from my childhood, is is a consistent sense of wonder about the world and the universe and people. Because when I'm anywhere, I'm never bored, because there's always things to watch and people to watch. I'm just constantly taking things in with a sense of wonder, because I was like, what's their story? What, like, when you see these memes that share, like, when you meet someone, you have no idea, you're just seeing the surface, like the tip of the iceberg. You have no idea of all of the things going on in their lives with this
Exactly.
one simple encounter. So there's depths and magnitudes to so many people. And as a writer, I'm constantly looking for those depths, and because, again, like, this motivation, why did this guy yell at that sales clerk? Like,
Yeah,
what's his
exactly.
problem? Well, what happened just prior to this event that
Mhm.
triggered that?
Yeah,
He's
because.
probably, people aren't bad in general. Things happen to them, right?
hmm So there's actions and then there's reactions, but you always want to, you're reacting out of, perhaps fear or protection.
Yeah,
But what caused that action in the first place, right? That's where
exactly.
you kind of dive deep into, like you said, what's beneath the tip of that iceberg. And
Yeah,
I, as an author, I think that's a very unique insight to how I think a lot of your books perhaps maybe come to be,
yeah.
because you're looking beneath the surface, right? You're going down deep and you're wanting to know what makes them up.
Yeah.
And that's how your characters are born, probably, right?
Yeah, I know in one of my novels, so I, comma, Death, which is it's a novel, a horror novel, very dark horror novel about a teenager who has a death curse, and he believes that everyone he meets, or becomes friends with, or falls in love with, the closer he gets to them, the more likely they are to die, because it's just happened to him his whole life. His mom was died, giving birth to him, and like all these things kept happening to him. So he's just trying to avoid contact with people because he doesn't want to kill anymore. And then there's this bad guy, the villain, who discovers he has this power
Oh.
and wants to use it to his advantage. But of course, in creating the bad guy, he's not evil. Something happened for him to be the person he is today. and
Mhm.
and it was really interesting for me because when I first created him, I was like, he's a bad guy, and he's just going to do these mean things. And then when I started digging into his character, I was like, oh, this is why he's the way he is. This is what he's trying to achieve. He's trying to compensate for this lack of love and compassion by searching for power, because it's the one thing he can control, is
Mhm.
power over other people. And you know what I mean? Like, and so suddenly he's not evil, he's just a bad guy. And there was a TV show, there was a TV show called Flashpoint. It was a police drama. It was on television. It was filmed here in Canada, and it was at least, I think, 8 or 9 years ago that it was on. One of the things I love so much about this TV show is just that it was a sort of the SWAT team who were designed to take out, you know, like, I have a solution means I can shoot this person in the head and bam, the whole hostage situation stops or whatever. But what I love so much about the characterization and the writing for this TV show was they usually started in the heat of the moment, and then they did, okay, 6 hours earlier or 10 hours earlier or the week before, and you got to see the bad guys and what led to them being in the situation. And 9 times out of 10, they were not bad. They just made bad decisions or they got themselves in a situation where suddenly the police are coming after them. And
And they're gonna back themselves into a corner, and this was
yeah,
the way out kind of thing?
but for as a writer, seeing a show like that
Yeah.
actually shows the motivation and shows the depth of character is so important. I think villains have to have as much depth as the hero does, because
Mhm.
that's real. Because when you think about somebody, I get into a interaction with the sales clerk, and we get into an argument over the price or whatever, because I saw the price was posted and whatever. And, it's a minor conflict. But from my perspective, I'm telling that story. I'm the hero, and they're the bad guy. But then
Mhm.
from their perspective, I'm the bad guy who's just like, oh man, I've been here like a 12-hour shift and I'm exhausted. And now you're yelling at me for something I have no control over. Do you know what I mean? So I'm the bad guy in that story. So remembering that for me as a writer, it's so important to make stories more authentic and real. But for me as a human, as a person, it's even more profound to remember that.
I have to say it's the first time I've ever dove in deep into the mind of an author, and I'm so happy I have been given the opportunity to do that. To think that, you're talking about horror and ghost stories, but I think that at the same time, you have that's your element of entertainment, but
Yeah.
but listening to you basically tells me that you've taken that extra step and made sure that these characters can be somewhat relatable. That
Yeah.
it's not so. I mean, it's a fiction book by all
Yeah.
means,
Yeah.
but I think somewhere in there might be some undertones where people can actually relate to it.
Oh, for sure. Like, I'll give you an example from a horror story of mine that's in my book, One Hand Screaming. And so imagine, and this happens, right? In a town, there's the house where the old guy lives by himself, and people tell stories about what he's up to. And the stories are that this guy has kept his dead wife in the bedroom upstairs. And there's
Oh,
eerie stories of why did he keep his wife's body and he never buried her and stuff like that. Well, in the story, you get his perspective is that his wife had I'm afraid of bugs. She was so afraid of bugs, she made her husband promise on her deathbed that when she died, he would not put her in the ground so the ground bugs wouldn't get her. And
wow.
so he decided to keep her body away from the ground bugs until all the flesh was gone, and then he could bury her bones, and then she would be okay. And that was his one wish on her dying. So it's kind of like he seems like a creepy guy, but he's just honoring this woman he's loved for 60 years. And he does not want anything to happen to her. And he promised her. And that's the most important thing. And so it's a horror story. It's called Treats. It takes place on Halloween, where these kids are toilet papering his house, and creating mischief because he's the creepy old guy, right? Because that happens in lots of neighborhoods, right? Is the creepy old
Yeah.
person? Like, who is she? She's a witch or whatever, right? So it was that concept, but you hear it from Percy's point of view, and so and I wrote the story initially when I was really young, and now that I'm older and I reread it, I'm like, oh wow, I guess I kind of understand that long-term commitment love that you have, and that you would, as hard as it is, you would honor that for the person that you've spent that many decades of your life with.
And understanding the books that you read and the way you dive deep in the characters and the way that we're able to have instant access to news stories or things that happen around the world, um, and seeing all these crime shows. But the crime shows, they don't focus on why did this person do this, what led this person. It like automatically just like labels them bad person, evil person, they did this so therefore they are that, right? And
Yeah,
I find it very very, touching that you have gone beyond the the obvious here on these characters, and it makes me wonder if we as a human society are able to step back from the evil that we hear about, and then also sit there and say, but why?
yeah.
Are we
Well,
just giving an injustice by just automatically labeling them and throwing stones at them straight away because we see what they did, but we don't give them
yeah.
we're not going to give them the chance or the opportunity to tell us why.
I mean, it's a weird thing because it comes from human nature, right? It comes from the fact that we need to fear things in order to protect ourselves.
Correct. Oh
Therefore,
yes.
therefore, we do these things that involve prejudice. Oh, I can't eat that color berry because the last time I ate that color berry, I got really, really sick. Therefore, I'll never touch those berries. Like that kind of thing, and that can lead to a lot of accidental, like mistakes and errors in terms of the way we react to things. But one of the there are several studies that I've paid attention to that demonstrate that those who read fiction are more empathetic. And those that read nonfiction are also more empathetic for two reasons. When you read about a fictional character, and particularly if the author has put care into creating real characters that are authentic and genuine, people are able to see the point of view of someone else who's not them and
Mhm.
live in their shoes. And that's empathy. They get to actually go, oh, this is what it would be like to be an old man whose wife of 60 years has just died and he promised her this, and he's hearing these kids making fun of him and it hurts him, but he's still the creepy old guy, right?
Mhm.
So there's the empathy of going, oh, I never thought of it that way. I'm just the kid that says that this creepy old guy, like he has his dead wife in the house, that kind of stuff. And then the other thing is when you read nonfiction, it sometimes allows you the ability to understand something you didn't understand. And that can lead to empathy. And so for me as a writer, and I did a keynote on this this spring actually, and it was dear writer, the world needs you now more than ever. And it's a reminder that in this world where it's so easy to quick and judge, and we see something on the news and we make an assumption, and then suddenly hate people because of it,
Mhm.
right? The
Yeah.
defensive is like, oh, I got to protect my family and myself from this, so therefore I'm going to hate them. It's a reminder that one of the most valuable things that storytellers, musicians, artists, and writers can do when we create, when we create art, when we create stories, when we create music and art, when we curate things and put them into a museum, we
Hmm.
allow people the ability to experience empathy and understanding and compassion for others. We, in a sense, draw a connection and we bring people closer together. That's what your museum does. That's
Yes,
what writers do.
exactly.
That's what music does, right? That's what
Mhm.
art does. I mean, it can just be escapism and entertainment, and that's good. We need it. We need romance novels. We need a happy ending, for God's sake, right?
Right. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And they
Yeah.
lived happily ever after, but then we know they're going to die.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, you're right. I think we have to have that balance between hope and reality,
Yeah,
right? I think hope. is what allows, feeds the soul the energy and nourishment that it needs to continue on to moving one step further or one step closer to whatever we think that destination is. Um, but then at the same time, there's the reality. I think if we live
Yeah.
in too much reality, we could possibly also lose ourselves,
Yeah.
right?
No,
So
for
we
sure.
need to sometimes step outside of that. And I think that, authors do a really good job based on the amount of different types of books that we have access to.
Yeah.
Just like they always say, funeral directors have a quirky sense of humor, right?
Yeah.
Well, people have to understand we are dealing with people at their most horrible time of their life.
Yeah.
They've just experienced their horror novel, right?
Yeah.
Their horror
Yeah.
novel has come to reality,
Yes.
and we're there to help get them through the end of that chapter and
Yeah.
help them start a new chapter. And we take on, and you talked about empathy, right? Funeral directors are very empathetic, even though
Oh,
we may look stoic, right? A lot of
yeah.
people say,
Yeah.
people even tell me, we were talking about looks earlier on in our podcast. People look at me when I tell them that I'm a mortician. They're like, you don't look like a mortician. I'm like, well, what am
Yeah.
I supposed to look like?
Right.
Am I
Yeah.
supposed to look scary? Am I supposed to be all in black? I don't know. You know, but there's these preconceived visions that people have on what people should look like, how people should act. And
Yeah.
as funeral directors, they already have us in a box, if you will, of what we're supposed to
Right.
look like and how we're supposed to behave. And but they don't realize how much we endure for the families
Oh my
because of our
gosh.
heightened sense of empathy that we tend to possess across our profession.
Right.
And with that, we take that home with us and we have to find a way to rebalance ourselves, right? And so
Yeah.
that's where our quirky sense of humor comes in. And it
Yeah.
allows us to laugh again when
Right.
we've just sat in a room for hours of people crying and
Yeah.
having the heaviest sense of grief that fills the room that we are now exposed to. And, we don't wear armor. It does penetrate us.
Yeah.
Um, so we get that quirky sense of humor that helps us balance, regroup, recharge, and be able to go back at it again. And I think it's interesting of like we were saying how we in our own lives we have a balance of thrills and chills and horror and ghost stories, but then we have our romance novels and we have
Yeah.
our funny, quirky, you know non-fictional, out of this world kind of experiences as well. So um, when you think about it, there's a little bit out there for everybody, but I think also there's a little bit out there for everybody who needs something in that time of their life.
Oh, for sure. And you know what? It's so funny because we think about, okay, so people who work in law enforcement or people who work in the legal system and people who work in emergency medicine or whatever, and hospitals and doctors, they see some of the worst things and the people doing bad things to one another and the end of life, but they also get to witness triumph.
Mm-hmm.
But a funeral director does encounter people at the worst time in their lives and yet takes them through and brings them across that. That's got to weigh. That has got to weigh on a person. The only thing I can imagine, and again, I don't know this. I've only had um I remember the first time I met the owners of the funeral home back in Sudbury. It was Jerry Lawhead who came to speak with our high school class. And it was one of the first people I remember encountering. He was just genuinely a person who brought light and goodness to everyone. And it was
Mm-hmm.
kind of like, this is a guy who deals with dead, like
Yeah.
death. His whole business is death, and yet he was so compassionate and so caring. And when I think, and I remember because I was at a funeral last month that it's now the younger generation that's running it. And there's a picture of him on the wall, and just seeing his picture brought this power and love to me. And also having dealt with him through personal grief at a time, knowing just how much he gave,
Mm-hmm.
it was a reminder to me. It was a reminder to me of the good that I got out of this bad experience. But then I never thought about how hard that must have been, where you're there constantly lifting other people up. But then there's another element. And I was talking to someone earlier for my podcast, who was talking about when you get to a point in your life. I think, Christmas and birthdays are fun because you get a gift, but I love giving a gift to someone to see what it does to them and their reaction. So my kid, I picked up a book for his birthday, and I thought, oh, I think he'll like this book, and he loved it. And I was happy to get it for him, but I was even happier to see how into it he was. He's
Yeah.
flipping through it and checking. He's like, "Oh, I can't wait to read this." And it was like the joy of giving is a joy in and of itself. And so I can imagine, and I'm only again trying to put myself in your shoes to say that yes, it's hard because you have to constantly be pulling people out of the darkness and doing everything you can to make it as smooth as possible at the most difficult time where they're not thinking properly and they're
Yeah.
very emotional. But then recognizing that what you're doing is being there for someone at the hardest time in their life, and you've made it better for them, and that in itself is a bit of a gift.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, because we're people of service, right? That's our chosen profession, is to be of service to others. And for those people that are in professions that are of service to others, like you said, the doctors, the EMS people, volunteers that go out after a tragedy,
Yeah,
with with like our floods that we just experienced, and the people that are showing up there to help. So sometimes there's a sense of I want to say fulfillment in being able to give, because
yeah,
that's the type of people that we are. We're
yeah,
givers, and to give our time, give our expertise, give our support, or just give our presence,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's something for them, and it's fulfilling for us as well. It fills up our cup, right? Uh,
yeah,
and it allows us to validate our purpose and our chosen professions.
yeah. Wow, and I'm so glad we're having this conversation because again, you've allowed me some really rich and meaningful insights. Again, everything is fruit for
Yeah.
inspiration for a story. I can't help it.
Oh no, it's good.
It
Perhaps
all
one of
comes in. It's going to get
yes,
it into a story somewhere.
yeah. Maybe the next thing we know, we'll have a book on a mortician,
Well,
the
yes.
main character.
Yeah, of course.
Then we'll have to have it in the museum's gift shop.
There you go. Yeah. But
Uh,
but but I think you know what I mean. That's such a. I mean, yes, there was 6 Feet Under, for example, was
hmm
a popular TV show that I remember was about that business
hmm
and some of that. But again, a lot of TV shows kind of take it to the, not every day in like talking to police officers because I've done a lot of research with them is like, yeah, there's just a lot of sitting around or driving around and waiting. It's not action after action, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think my husband and I was there. We watch Live PD and OPL all the time, and the guy's like, "Oh, well, we have like 9 cameras, or we have like 19 cameras, or all these cameras." I mean, so yeah, we're always getting to catch the action because you have so many cameras out there.
Mhm.
One of them's going to be active, at
Yeah.
one time, and then hopefully you'll have two that you can, make a show out of, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. And my sister was a police officer as well, and yeah, there was just a lot of sitting,
Yeah.
driving around. I was on a ride along with her one time, and we were just driving around, and
Yeah.
I'm like, she's out there looking for stuff that doesn't belong,
Yeah.
right? She knows her community, and she's there to protect her community. Again, a job of service, and like you say, you're waiting for something bad to happen so you can be, because you're there ready,
Yeah.
but at
Yeah.
the same time you're also making sure that something is there that something is not there that
Yeah.
shouldn't be as well. So
It's so funny. In back in university, back in the late '80s, early '90s, I think it was third year university, and I took English language and literature. And one of the classes, and it was so fascinating because I think it was called it was either the Writer Literature and Society or something. But one of the professor wanted us to understand preconceptions about things and then the reality. And so us
oh
as readers, we could have a conception of what it is. And so we had to pick some stereotypical place. So some people was like, I'm going to pick strip clubs because I've never been in one. I have a preconception of what it is. Blah 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 blah. And I picked the ER,
yeah. Oh.
based on TV shows and dramas
Mhm.
and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I'm gonna go on a Saturday night. It's gonna be the busiest. I'm gonna sit and I even had like back in the early day, I had like my little Sony Walkman kind of thing where I was recording everything in the background because I wanted to catch it all. And I had to write about my preconceptions, then write about my experience, and then that was my essay, was talking about the reality versus the preconception, and it just really helps us. And I remember it being one of the longest, most boring nights waiting for something to happen. It was just people like coughing or whatever, you know, like it was not this major trauma that you see in the TV shows where there's constantly ambulances rushing people in, and there's six people around them trying to, you know, keep them, you know, keep them
Exactly.
alive as they go. And it was just, what I loved about that is not only did I get to share my own experience of what happened on a Saturday night at this particular ER, and I know it was just one Saturday night, um, but all the other students who shared their own, again, this wasn't a writer class, but as a writer I went, ooh, this is valuable for me to understand that people have a perception, and then there's a reality.
And it's so funny that I will flip that one on its head, because we always get people who have a preconceived understanding of what we are as the National Museum of Funeral History.
Yeah.
And they're like, ugh, why would I want to go there? Ugh, that sounds scary, or that's creepy. And I'm like, no, you've got to give us a chance. At least come, don't take someone else's opinion as your
Yeah.
own. And then people come here, and I kid you not, if I had a nickel for every time somebody said, wow, I would be a little bit rich right now,
Yeah.
because people will come in here with their preconceived notion of what of what we might look like. That we might have, caskets with bodies in it, or I've even had people ask me, "Do you guys have dead bodies there?" And I'm like, "No,
Yeah.
we don't have dead bodies here." So it's
Where's
funny.
Igor, right? Like, you know,
Yeah,
that kind of
exactly.
stuff. Yeah.
Like it's interesting sometimes to hear what people think we are, or how we um, have our exhibits displayed. But then they
Yeah.
come in and they're like, "Whoa, wow, oh my God, I did not expect this."
Yeah.
We are probably the most unexpected experience that people have had. And so, yeah, it's really neat to hear people's before and afters, because
Yeah.
it's so like night and day,
Right.
so polar opposite to what they thought. And then of course, when I first started trying to get the museum as an accepted place to want to visit, a bucket list item, on your travels to the big city of Houston, um, I got people turning their nose up at me left and right. They're like, ugh, why
Yeah.
would I want to go there? You know, but even though we do represent, just like I'm sure people like don't want to read your book because it might be scary. People don't want to visit the museum because it might remind them of death. But
Right.
death happens to us all. And what better way than to kind of approach that scary subject of death? Or when you have children, like we talked earlier, children are innocent. They're a blank palette. And what better way for parents to introduce death to children, because it is a part of life.
Yeah.
They're going to experience it with a pet or a family member, a grandparent, hopefully, because then it follows the normal circle of life. Um, but what better way to help people understand not only what death is, or understanding the profession that cares for the dead and understands what a funeral is and had different ways to memorialize your loved one, than at the museum, because then you're bringing people into this neutral environment
Yeah.
when you're not being distracted by grief, and you're able to open up your mind, and you'll be able to expand your thought processes. So it's just kind of like, I mean, now, I'm not a big horror book reader. I like ghost stories. But after listening to you and learning about how you basically dive deep into the mind of your characters, whether they be the good or the bad character, the way you tell like the whole story about them and how they came to be, I'm like, I'm ready to read your book. I'm
Yeah.
like, I already wrote them down. I'm like Phantom Mitch and Treats, and I'm like, okay, I gotta get a hold of those books, because I really want to know what they're about, because you've already given me a taste of
Right.
what those books can kind of like open up a part of my world that I've never even thought about.
Yeah.
And I find that very fascinating. We all get into our little niches in life, and I think with the you know the opportunities to podcasting and these short videos and Facebooking and TikToking and all these different platforms that we have, the way we can now dive into other people's worlds and learn a little bit more. I like to think that it would be nice to say we have a little less prejudice in the world because we're able to see into other people's worlds and minds and understand them a little more. Kind of like the way you get us to understand your characters.
Yeah, I think there's a real goal in that. And it's so funny as you were talking, I was remembering one of my favorite, and I don't know Latin very well, but one of my favorite phrases is memento mori, which I'm
Oh, yes.
sure you're intimately familiar with that, and there's different interpretations
Mm-hmm.
of what that translates to. But even in my collection of horror stories, One Hand Screaming, one of the stories is called Memento Mori.
Oh, wow.
And it is another story that takes place on Halloween where a man is, and it's actually inspired by a Mark Twain story called A Curious Dream. Now I call it Memento Mori, A Curious Nightmare.
Oh,
And I take the Twain piece and I take it to the next level where a man's just watching this procession of skeletons dragging their coffins down the street, and he's just aghast. And he stops one of them and he says, "What's going on?" He's like, "Oh, we're sick and tired. There's no respect for the dead anymore. It used to be a beautiful place to spend all eternity, but now it's decrepit. No one visits us." And it was like, and it's moral story that Mark Twain was talking about the derelict cemetery that no one was taking care of 100
mhm.
plus years ago. And then I took it to the next level because I had to up it a little bit more. It's sort of a darkly humorous, satirical look at our selfishness and the fact that we don't take care of this world. We don't take care of each other anymore. And it was sort of that I mean, that's the moral of the story. But
Yeah,
again, the whole idea is this: we don't respect us anymore. What the heck, you know?
yeah, and it's interesting that you say that because there's this part of society that sometimes they're so into you know production and building something new and stuff, and then they forget that maybe 100 years ago that might have been a cemetery, and they build on top of it, and now
Yeah,
those people that are in there are forever lost,
yeah, yeah,
forever lost, forever gone, forever covered up. And like you said, they've been forgotten. And in our and I really don't know who came up with this concept, but it's a rather poignant concept, and it's called our second death.
yeah.
And the first death, of course, is the physical death, but the second death is when the last person alive
Yes.
who knew who you were and your existence in this life has
Yes.
now died.
Yeah, that
Uh,
is a powerful. Yeah, I don't know who, but that thought is something. My wife and I talk about a lot, actually.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
because it's like
because you're
you
still alive. You're still alive in some way until that
that
happens.
last person that knows you or can
Yeah,
can speak to you or of you has
yeah.
passed. Now that you're no longer in existence. Yeah.
And but what happened? So what happened? So I think about someone like Shakespeare who passed along, and like we don't, none of us have known him personally, but we still talk about and still experience the work of. Or I can see the painting on the Sistine Chapel and think of Michelangelo and the art and the dedication to creating that. You know what I mean? Like you wonder, has the second death happened, or have we pushed it off a little bit longer?
I think for those people specifically, I don't think it'll ever happen
Yeah,
because they have left a mark in
yeah,
our society and that continues to be reiterated generation after generation. They're
yeah,
constantly reintroduced.
yeah,
Um, and they're in our history books, but they're also in the future history books as well
yeah,
because of their contribution to society and to our to mankind. So I don't think they ever will have a
yeah,
second, to be honest.
yeah. So
It's an interesting concept to think about, you
yeah,
know. But I really think that there's probably only maybe 1% of the entire population will
yeah,
perhaps never experience a second death, whereas all the 99% will.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that is the same stats for authors and books that actually are successful. It's
Oh, really?
probably, yeah, in terms of like there's lots of them out there, but most of them are just gonna fade
Fade
off
away.
and have their second death.
Yeah, yeah.
Goes out of print, and then the second death is when nobody remembers that book anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. So you've been an author from since 1992. So how has your authorship gone? I mean,
Mm.
from 1992 to today.
Yeah,
Give me a glimpse into that. That
yeah,
what has it been a constant upward, or has there been a point in time where you just had this massive rush of
mm.
great supporters? And do you have a lot of followers,
Right.
groupies, if you will?
You know what? I'm really lucky. I've been, for more than 40 years, writing for more than 40 years. And I'm very lucky, and I say this sort of tongue in cheek, but I also say it seriously. I'm very lucky that I've never had a huge success. I've
Oh,
had good fortune, and I've had fortune smile upon me, and I've had great things happen to me, but all relatively smaller, beautiful, wonderful things, slow and steady upward. And I'm grateful for that, because had I had any huge success, I've had successes. I've had books win awards. I've had books been nominated for awards. I've had television show appearances and radio show appearances, and hit the bestseller list and hit number one in categories, and made decent bucket loads of money on certain books at certain times. Yeah, I've had all of those things happen to me, but I've never had one breakaway, knockout bestseller, so that I've had to go back and go, oh, like, yes, there's highs and lows. Yes, oh, this is a good year. This is a bad year. This is a good a day. This is a good week. Fortunately, over time, I've had enough positive things. So on Sunday, I was at an in-person event in Ontario, Canada, here where I live, and I was there from noon till 5, and I sold a whole bunch of books to new people who had never heard about me, and that's the great thing. I get to sign the books, and they're happy and excited, and we get to interact, and that's just lovely. And they're attracted by the skeleton and my signs and all the stuff, because they go, "Ooh, ghost stories," right? Like, and they
yeah.
come in. But then and I was telling my wife, I think I had three different people come up and said, "Oh my God, I've got one of your books at a fair 2 years ago where I saw you. I'm so excited you're here. I want to get something else of yours." And it's that, oh, so I didn't turn you off. You actually liked me, Sally
Mm,
Field. You really liked me, that you wanted more of my stuff. And
yeah.
I've gone to events, because I have my urban fantasy, my Canadian werewolf dark humor series. A Canadian Werewolf in New York is the first book in that series, and it's sort of
Oh,
this dark humor adventure of this bumbling Canadian in a major city who turns into a wolf and has superpowers, and he helps people. It's not a scary story, it's more of a dark humor adventure. And I actually had somebody show up at this one event in a werewolf costume with my books, and he wanted me to sign them, and because he wanted to meet me and get a picture taken with me. So
oh, oh,
I've had enough successes along the way that I'm very fortunate and I'm very lucky. I mean, I stopped working full time in 2017 because I started finally to be making enough money. I didn't have to work full time. I
that's
still do consult, and I work part time consulting for different folks. So I'm very lucky in that regard. But the other thing that happened is, when I started in this industry, there was only one way to publish, and that was to get an agent or a publisher, and hopefully New York gave their blessing, and off you went. Well, now I'm an author who's lucky enough. I have over 35 books out, and I have probably about a dozen of those books with different publishers, like traditionally published.
mm-hmm.
So you can walk into a Barnes and Noble and find a copy of my Haunted Hospitals book, for example, on the shelf, or Tomes of Terror. Haunted bookstores and libraries, you may find, on any bookshelf, because those are through a traditional publisher. My Ghosts of the Great Lakes book that's coming out next year is going to be with a traditional publisher, so chances are you'll find it in bookstores, at least in states and provinces that are near the Great Lakes.
Yeah.
um, but I also self-publish, and I'm able to put together my books and make them available in print, in hardcover and paperback and ebook and audiobook, and put them out myself, and control those books, and get them into the world without having to wait for the blessing of a New York agent or publisher. and
Right.
and a lot of those successes, like the very first book that I published, it was 2004 was my first iteration of the book One Hand Screaming, and that was self-published,
Wow.
and that was a book that continues. I mean, I've got the 20th anniversary edition came out last year. So One Hand Screaming, 20 haunting years. So I made it twice the size. It was like a 20th anniversary celebration of my very first book. So I had to have new art and new stories because I'd published more stories in the previous 10 years or 20 years or whatever. And so that has reminded me just how lucky I am, because
Yes.
I have a million ideas and I'm never going to run out of ideas. I mean, I've probably got at least 15 books right kind of here. Like,
Wow.
I'm working on a few right now. So I'm working on Ghosts of the Great Lakes for a publisher. I'm working on the next book in my Canadian Werewolf series. It'd be book 8 in that series. I'm working on a collection of silly dad jokes because I love making people laugh. And so I'm
Oh,
putting that together. I've done movie trivia guides for Die Hard and Christmas Vacation and Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. So I'm working on a book on Perfect Strangers, which is one of my favorite TV shows from the 80s, but also Cheers, another one of my favorite TV shows. So again, I figure if I'm going to watch these shows over and over again and I'm going to learn cool trivia, I'm going to put them into a book.
there
And
you go.
so I I have no shortage of ideas, but fortunately, I can work with publishers and I can control it. I can DIY it myself.
That is
Um,
amazing.
and
That's
so,
that's all
yeah,
because of technology though, right? Technology.
technology, yeah, yeah. Like
That's,
even when I first started 21 years ago, it was hard. You had to understand how to do print layout, and you needed to know it like from the inside. And now you just need a Word document. You hire a good cover designer and an editor, and the tools allow you to make a beautiful looking book without having to know layout and design or having to spend thousands of dollars on that. So it's really, I often say for writers, it's the best time to be a writer, but it's also the scariest time because there's so much choice, and with choice comes what I call analysis paralysis.
oh,
Well, what format should I make my book? Six is 5 by 8, 6 by 9, 4.25 by 6.25. Should it be a big one? Should it be a hardcover? Like, what should I do?
yeah,
What
yeah.
cover should I go with? Like all of these things. Like and how should I publish it? Should I just think about Amazon only? Should I try and get it to other places? And that can be scary, and I always come back to when I'm working with, because I work with a lot of authors too, and I like to help them out and help them not make a lot of the mistakes I made. Is the same thing that my wife and I used to do when my son was little. Is okay, he's going to dress himself now. We're not going to give him the full choice of all the things. We're going to say, here's a choice between 2 pairs of pants. Here's a choice between 4 different shirts. That's your choice. You got to pick something. Because if he
Narrow
goes
it
to
down.
his closet, he's going to be there all day going, ah.
Exactly. That's a really good way to present it and help people to understand. So I'm aghast that you're writing all these different books at the same time. How do you track them? Are they like filed in your brain, and when you
Yeah,
come up with a concept for one, you kind of
yeah.
do you immediately have to go write it down, or are you able to retain it until you get back to your computer?
So when it's a novel, I really have to almost every day sit down for about an hour every morning at a specific time, usually first thing in the morning, and just chunk away at it. With the nonfiction, it's easier. So, for example, I just encountered a video I saw on YouTube, and it was a clip from Perfect Strangers, and it was the Dance of Joy. And so I haven't started actively writing the book, but I'm actively taking notes. So I have a document that I've opened up, and I went, oh, here are a couple of things I want to explore further. So these are notes of things I'm going to want to dig into later. And then when I pick up that book and whatever, I like to say this, the stove in my writer's house, I have two front burners. So I'm usually working on 2 or 3 books simultaneously in different genres at the same time. But my back burner, it goes back several feet. And I
Ah,
have all these projects that are there that I come dip in and out of, and they may not be active until I suddenly either have a contract with a publisher for it, or okay, now I have enough notes that I can make it into something for real.
you can pull it
And
from the back burner to the front
and
burner
I
now.
go, okay, now this is my
Yeah.
baby. I'm going to focus on this, and that's what I usually do. And so sometimes this is the other thing is I can't believe in writer's block. If I don't believe in writer's block, it won't believe in me. And
Because
so
I was gonna ask that question. Do you ever get writer's block?
But so let's say I'm working on my novel. I'm working on my next Canadian Werewolf in London, Ontario is the next book in the series, and I'll be working on a scene for it, and I get stuck.
Uh-huh.
That's my subconscious mind telling me something's wrong. So I put that aside, and then I go work on my dad joke book because that's easier and lighter, and it's like you only need a one liner for that, so I can work on that for a while, and then putting your mind in a different perspective sometimes it clears everything and you come back and sometimes I'm in the middle of a jog, or I'm in the middle of washing the dishes, or I'm in the middle of working on a nonfiction book, and suddenly, oh my god, the thing, and then I rush back to the other book and go, okay, I've solved it.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Right.
For me,
Yeah,
it's like I'm in the shower, and then I
yeah,
have all these awesome thoughts, and I get out. I'm like, I gotta write it down because if I don't write it out in 5 minutes, it's gone. And
exactly.
it's like,
Yeah,
golly, I had such a great idea, but it's no longer there. I could talk with you forever, but I mean, we didn't even get to touch on ghost stories. So,
I
if you
know.
are willing, I would love to have you back, and
Yeah,
I
for
would
sure.
love to. I, I mean, give me one of your best ghost story novels because I think what I'd love to do is get it myself and read it, and then and pull some stuff from it and make a
Yeah,
podcast out of it because
sure.
that's a niche yet that I have yet to embrace.
Well, would you want true ghost stories or fiction?
I think I would like true.
Okay, all right, then I'll have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say potentially haunted hospitals may be appealing.
Yeah, well, it's
Or
definitely appealing to me because, you know,
yeah.
I just retired as a palliative nurse. So I was a
Oh,
palliative nurse.
then that may and that's about 33% Canadian, 33% American, 33% rest of world.
Oh, okay.
So
Great.
that one may be appealing, and that one's probably more available. I would love to have you on my podcast actually to
Oh,
talk about what you guys do.
yeah,
And now my
definitely.
podcast is for writers, but knowing what you do as a profession and I'd like to explore the creativity in what you do and how you apply that creativity and get people to the wow factor. I
Yeah.
think would be very informational for writers to understand. I love that stuff.
Well, it's interesting because sometimes we host. I'm trying to remember that's an actual word. It's oh, Lucy knows it, but it's a writers forum. I don't want to use the word forum because it's not forum, but
Yeah,
it's for writers. And
yeah,
what we do is we allow them to come into the museum,
yeah.
and they bring their pillows, their blankets, their comfort items,
I'm in.
their their
I'm in. I'll fly down
computers.
to Houston.
Yeah, yeah, come on. I would love to have you. You know what you should do? You should come to our Witches Brew and have some of your haunted books there.
Oh, that sounds fun.
We could
Yeah,
feature
yeah.
have you as a featured guest at one of our markets because we have markets here.
Oh yeah, those are a lot of fun. Yeah,
Yeah, we have them in the museum, so it's a lot of fun. But we do that, and what the writers do is they come and they get inspired by our different
yeah.
exhibits. So
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that'd be great to talk about on the podcast as well.
yeah, definitely. So
Mm,
most definitely, let's have a podcast on haunted hospitals and your ghost stories, both
yeah,
fiction and non.
yeah,
But we'll open it up with haunted hospitals and my
yeah,
experience that I might have encountered reading the novel.
yeah.
Maybe wanting some more in depth behind the scenes knowledge behind some of the things I read about, um, and
Sure.
then talk about some of your other uh, fiction and nonfiction haunted novels that you
Yeah,
have.
yeah. So the ones that I have the rights to that I haven't sold, the haunted hospitals I sold to a publisher, so I can't send a digital file, but I can send
Oh,
audiobook or ebook or whatever for like some of the fictional stuff.
well, I'm all about the hard copy. I
Yeah,
love
okay, I
old
can send.
books.
Okay, well, I can
I,
mail you. I mean, I'm happy to mail you One Hand Screaming.
oh, oh, I would love it.
That's because I
Would you
have
sign it for me?
copies. Of course, I'd sign it. Yeah.
Because
So I'll
I
just
actually have a collection of signed books of people
yeah,
that I've encountered
for
who've
sure.
actually authored books. Because I've always wanted to write a book in my lifetime, but I don't think that'll ever happen because
Oh
it's
no,
just
don't say never. Don't say never.
such a huge task. It feels
Don't say
like.
never. No, it's not. It honestly,
Yeah.
it's yeah. You just take your
Well,
passion
Freddie's
and
already
you put
written.
it in there.
Freddie has several books under his belt,
There
so
you go. So you know. Okay.
yeah.
All right.
I'll get
Yeah,
going.
I'll get your address and then I can mail you some stuff.
Great. So, well, let me close out our
Yeah.
podcast here, my normal little
Yeah.
close, and then so Freddie can edit out what our small talk. He'll edit
Of
out our
course.
small talk
Of
for
course.
sure. So, Um, but Mark, any closing words for our listeners, that you would like them to know about, or perhaps leave them with a cliffhanger to where they want to go get some of your books?
I think just like people take a look at the museum and say, well, why would I want to do that? I think it's important for people to, when they say, well, why would I want to read that, regardless of the genre, whether it's horror or whatever, give it a chance. Open your mind, because when you open a book, you open your mind, and the possibility of just checking out what this is about, because the most incredible magical thing can happen when you open a book. You open up the universe and the universe of possibilities, and sometimes you'll be surprised at what you might discover, because a lot of people were put off reading because they were forced to read certain things. You have to read this book because it's important, and that it takes out all the love and passion. But if you can find something that you are really interested in and passionate about and read about it, then suddenly there's that connection for you, and suddenly the world is your oyster.
Oh yes, I love that statement. The world is your oyster. But I have to say, I resonate so much more with you, Mark, on the fact that never judge a book by its cover, because that was one of my mottos, kind of going in to getting people to shift the paradigm on the museum. I would always tell them, never judge our museum by our name,
Yes.
because we are so much more than just the National Museum of Funeral History. We possess so much more, and like your books, we open up the mind into parts of the world that they never knew existed. So yes, so much parallel between you being an author and me being a mortician and curator. And it's this has been a wonderful podcast with you, and I can't wait to future podcasts with you, and hopefully getting to read. I already not hopeful. I already know I'm going to be reading Haunted Hospitals, because that's going to be a precursor to our next podcast. So thank you again, Mark, for your time. Keep writing. I'm eager to hear more about what all your books entail. So thank
Thanks.
you again, and you know, keep up the great work.
You too. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you.